Welcome. Today I'm going to be showing you guys how to play Rescue Polar Bears. And as you can see, these polar bears here are definitely running out of space to stand on. Now, it's true that polar bears are excellent swimmers, but they can't swim indefinitely, and with the polar ice caps melting and ice just in general melting in Greenland and Canada and Alaska, obviously. It's a very harsh world for the polar bears right now. And so this game, Rescue Polar Bears Data and Temperature, is very heartwarming to try to rescue these guys if you can. Now, this is a co-op game which you'll be working together to try to save them all. So either you manage to collect enough data at the end of the game when you play two players, you have to collect 15 data tokens. Once you have collected 15 data tokens, the game will end, and essentially you will have rescued all the polar bears that you can. However, there are several ways that this game can end before doing so, and if a polar bear drowns, it's game over. Literally, game over. So, let's take a look. So, one of the ways that this game will end is if a polar bear drowns. Now, there are a couple of things that can happen to prevent a polar bear from drowning, besides just simply bringing your ship, and we got two of them, over to one of the ice caps here, and obviously picking up the polar bear and bringing it to safety, either to here or at another base tile that's all the way up at the top. I got most of the board, at least, on the video. Now, that's the basic way. Now, when a ice cap melts, and they will melt all the time, you can only have 3 polar bears on an ice cap, on one of these ice cap tiles. And so, if there's an adjacent ice cap tile that has less than 3 polar bears already on it, you can move them to safety. And so, for instance, if it was this tile that melted, one could move there, one could move there, and one could even move there. And they would all be saved, and none of them would drown, obviously. But that's not always the case. If it was this one that melted, one could make it to safety here, one could make it to safety here, but then one would start to sink. And when one starts to sink, that's where these helicopter tokens come in. So you can kind of see it's a let's see here if I can get it less fuzzy. Come on. Huh. So anyways, you can kind of see that it's a helicopter, right? And so when one is sinking, you'll use one of these helicopter tokens to rescue it before it drowns. But there's only 6 of these in the game, and even though there are some ways of getting more of these helicopter tokens, once you run out of helicopter tokens, and there's no safe place for a polar bear to go because the ice cap has melted, well, it drowns. And then the game is over, and you lost. So you can't even afford to let one polar bear drown in this game, because if that does happen, it's game over. So not even one polar bear is allowed to drown in this game, with you claiming victory and saving them all. So that's at least somewhat heartwarming, knowing that you're not going to allow a bunch of polar bears to drown before the game is over. Only one will drown, and it's game over. So that's how this works. Of course, supposedly, if you don't have any helicopter tokens and there's no place for these polar bears to go, and an ice cap melts, it could be all 3 that were sitting on the ice cap when it melted that drowned. So it's possible that, obviously, more than one could drown, but it doesn't matter because one is instant game over. Now, there's another way this game can end before you can complete it. If you'll notice over here, we have this token here, this temperature token, and it's currently on number 8. If you look at the very top, it goes all the way to 20. If this temperature token is on 20 at the end of a turn, completely at the end of the turn, or higher for that matter, it's instant game over. So if this temperature token goes up too high and it stays on 20 at the end of a player's turn, or for that matter, past 20, then it's game over. That could happen. So that's another way this game could just end and it would be game over. So you'll notice over here that there's this nice little tile token here with the number 13 on it. And if you look over here where I'm pointing, there's a token here. This is an ice melting token. This is the first tile that's going to melt. So when does that melt? Well, when this temperature token reaches number 13 or passes number 13, it will cause this tile to melt. Now, the way this game works is you're going to get a certain amount of actions per player, per ship. You're going to take those actions, trying your best to obviously rescue the polar bears, moving your ship around, collecting data tokens, and the only data token on the game right now is up here. There's only one data token at a time, unless you've got some sort of special card or special ability that lets you put more than one data token out at a time, but usually there's only one. And so you can pick one of those up as an action. If you are moving in the process of sailing or slash moving, and you happen to stop on a hexagon that has a data token in the water, you automatically pick it up, no additional action cost, which is nice. But since it's on that ice cap there, and if I was to collect that ice token, I would have to move my ship 1, 2, 3 spaces. Then I'd have to pick up the data token as a second action. Yes. So picking up data tokens will cost you an action unless you can luckily pick one up in the water as you stop on a water hexagon. Then, obviously, rescuing a polar bear will cost an additional action. So usually you can save one polar bear at a time as an action. Also, another thing to note is each ship can carry only a certain amount of polar bears. We have 2 ships out. We have Polaris, and this ship can hold 3 polar bears, and if you manage to get an upgrade token, you can use one of the upgrade tokens to hold 4 polar bears with this ship, or you can use the other upgrade token to increase the speed of the Polaris. Right now, the Polaris can only move 2 spaces at a time. That means that as an action, the Polaris can only go 2 spaces. So like 1, 2, that's an action. If it wanted to do more, it'd have to spend another action, 1, 2. So only 2 hexagons at a time for an action. But as an upgrade, you can make it 3 instead of 2 once you get that upgrade token. So you have a choice. You can put the upgrade token on this one or this one. Now, obviously, there's only going to be one upgrade token given to you at a time, so you may not even decide to put it on this ship. You might decide to put it on the other ship, which is the Breeze Dragon over here. Now, the Breeze Dragon can only hold 2 polar bears, so even less than the Polaris, obviously. Not only that, but it doesn't have an upgrade token that's going to allow you to have more capacity for polar bears. However, the Breeze Dragon does get 2 additional actions as an upgrade. So if you choose to use the upgrade token on the Breeze Dragon here, you're going to get an additional action per turn, with up to 5 possible actions per turn. So the other ships will only get to do 3 actions per player, 3 actions, but whoever happens to have the Breeze Dragon, once they've upgraded their ship all the way, they're going to get 5. They're going to get 5 actions, which is pretty sweet. But it's only for the Breeze Dragon. So the other players, they will not get those extra actions. Just the Breeze Dragon. So that's a special ability the Breeze Dragon has. Now, it's true its capacity is very small. It can only carry 2 polar bears at a time. But its speed is 3, So it can move 3 hexagons instead of 2 per action. So it can get it can get to the destination a little bit faster than obviously the Polaris can. So each ship, and there's 5 ships altogether in this game. And you'll only play with 4 max if you were playing with 4 players. You'd only play with 4 max anyways. But each ship has its own unique thing that it can do. Now with that said, the Polaris has a special ability as well. The Polaris, it has the ability to spend 1 loading action. So when you rescue a polar bear and put it on your ship, it's called a loading action. But you can actually load 2 polar bears at once by 1 loading action, which is really nice. So instead of spending 2 actions to rescue 2 polar bears with the Polaris, you could spend 1 action to rescue 2 polar bears that is adjacent to the ship. Meaning, it doesn't have to be from the same ice cap. It can be from other ice caps that are adjacent to the ship. You can grab 1 polar bear from that ice cap and 1 polar bear from that ice cap as a example. And it can do it with just 1 action, which is nice. The Breeze Dragon won't have that ability. But then the Breeze Dragon gets 5 extra actions, so that's nice. And other ships have other various abilities that can bring something nice and unique to the game. Now this is a co-op game, so everybody playing this game is going to be working together, and so they each have something that they can bring to the table depending on what ship they have that makes the game, well, somewhat easier, I suppose, especially if you have more unique abilities when you're playing with more people. This game is definitely going to be easier if you have more players than fewer. Now I'm going to play the solo variant of this game, which is basically going to allow me to control both ships as 1 player, which is still pretty nice that they have this solo variant available. It definitely makes it easier to explain if I can control both ships. But if you're playing co-op, obviously you each have your own ideas of how you're going to try to rescue these polar bears. And so teamwork would be a very essential, obviously. So, especially in this game, for sure. Now, one of the other actions you can take, besides simply collecting a data token from an ice cap, the way this game ends is you have to collect 15 of the data tokens, and you can sort of see this point thing here. This is where the data tokens you go when they are collected. They're going to go right here. And so there are 4 of these upgrade tokens available for 2 players once you reach them, because once you get enough data tokens, you can get an upgrade token. So once you get 15 of them in a 2-player game, the game is over. But there's only 1 out right now. So once that's gone, you can take an action that takes 1 of these cards, you'll flip it over, and you'll put the data token on a corresponding hexagon that's on this card. And you can use this little 1 flag here as a sort of like representation to kind of make it easier to figure out where it's going to go on this board, obviously. But that's how this works. And so, obviously, you're going to have to spend an action to get data tokens. But when? Do you do that over the place of saving a polar bear? I mean, yeah, you have 6 helicopters that could come and rescue the polar bears, but those go by very, very fast. And there's only a few ways to get them, and you may not even get them in the game. Additional helicopters, I mean. Now, you'll also notice there are these types of tiles too. These are support tiles. When you choose to stop on a support tile, you immediately flip it over. You're going to draw a card, which you guys can't see, that's up in the corner of this board here, and it's going to have a special unique thing that's going to happen, and it's going to be a huge benefit. Some might be better than others, and depending on the situation, some might be better than others as well. So, but it's random what will happen, and one of those possibly could get you some more helicopter tokens as well. But that's basically how this game's going to work. So you're going to take your 3 actions, maybe more if you're playing with the Breeze Dragon. You're going to try to rescue some polar bears. Now, once you get the polar bears on your ship and you reach maximum capacity, or you simply want to get some polar bears off of your ship so you can get more, you'll see this tile right here I'm pointing to. This is a base tile, and there's two of them. There's one here, and there's one at the very top of the board. You can take your ship up to that or to this one to basically unload all of the polar bears. That will cost you one action to do as well, to unload them all. But you don't have to like spend several actions unloading one at a time. You get to unload them all at once for one action. So that's how that works. And then, of course, then your ship will be empty, and then you can obviously get more polar bears. Now, after you take your action phase, after you're done with the action phase, there are two more phases that will happen on your turn. One of the next phase will actually be rolling this 20-sided die. Yeah, there's a 20-sided die in this game. This is the only game I have that has a 20-sided die, but it's only one. You're going to roll this, and I'm going to be using the birdhouse from Wingspan, since it's the only dice tower I have, so that way this is not rolling off the table, or knocking over polar bears, accidentally knocking the polar bear off the ice cap and into the water, and it drowns. That would not be good. So that's what we'll be using this for. And so we'll be rolling this, and you'll get a certain number, 1 to 20, and these ice caps are numbered from 1 to 20, and so it will affect the ice cap, and there will be several different things that could happen on that part of the turn. One of the things that could happen is, depending on what polar bears are on the ice cap, if any at all, there could be some growth. Some of the baby polar bears could become adults. Kind of your choice how you're going to, what gender they're going to be, male or female. But you can't put like two males on the same hexagon, and you can't put two females on the same hexagon. It has to be one male, one female, if there's two babies on the hexagon, as a for instance. And that can happen because you could be rescuing the males and females and leaving the babies there, and then they could grow up and become adults. And that might be a sound strategy, more than you think, because the other thing that can happen is reproduction. Yes, just because the ice cap is melting, just because they are potentially going to drown, does not mean that reproduction is not something that still is going to happen. And so that is another thing that could possibly happen. You could have a male and female on the same tile, and they could reproduce two cubs, which is a problem. Why is that a problem? Well, if they already have a cub already on there as well, that's a huge problem. Because once you put those two down, you can only have 3 on this ice cap. So, this is what could possibly happen. Now you have to relocate 2 of the babies. Thankfully, if it was this one here, you could relocate both of them there safely. And then still have one there, obviously. That's something that could happen. You could do that. Or relocate one here and one there, for instance. But basically, mother and father will push the cubs off the ice cap, because only 3 are allowed on at a time, so they might be forced onto one of these. But if there's no place for them to go, meaning all of these have 3 as well, and they have reproduction happen, because there's a male and female, and reproduction happens, which can happen, they could push both of them into the water. You'd have to use 2 helicopter tokens to save them, and that's 2 less helicopter tokens for the rest of the game. That could be bad. So that's one of the things that could happen. Reproduction and growth is definitely something you want to try to avoid. You definitely want to try to avoid reproduction. Growth, not so bad. So it might be better to save the adults before the babies, because you're better off getting growth than reproduction, for sure. Now, with that said, there's something else that could also happen. And to indicate how that would work is we'll bring up this dice. Now, this is the other dice in the game. This is the temperature dice. So this is the last thing you'll do on your turn. You will roll this dice, and it's a 6-sided die. So there's a 6 on here somewhere, I believe. Let's see, where's the 6? Am I only up to 5? Actually, yeah, there's 2 4s. So there's no 6. There's no 6 number on this. But there's also no 1 number on this either. So that's another thing. So you're only going to roll 2, 3, 4, or 5. Now, when you roll the temperature dice, this temperature token is going to go up by that number. And remember, if this goes up, it starts at 8 right now, but if this goes up and hits 13 or passes it, it will cause 13 to melt, which is bad, which is very bad. So you want to make sure the temperature doesn't go up too high at a time to try to give you a chance to save those polar bears on the ice cap before it melts, of course. Now, you think 5 is the max you could get. You'd be wrong, because if growth and reproduction doesn't happen, meaning you roll this blue dice and growth doesn't happen and reproduction doesn't happen, then what happens is temperature goes up by 1. So now, whatever the number is, plus 1 is how high this will go. So that means it could possibly go up to 6. And if it did, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it definitely passes that token and melts the ice cap. So that's bad, obviously. Now, there is some good news. It's not all bad if it causes one of the ice caps to melt. Because once that happens, once an ice cap melts, it cools the water down. And so it cools the temperature down. And so this token will actually go down by 5 after it passes or hits the corresponding token that is on here. And these are alert tokens. That's what they're called. And after an alert token is removed, meaning the ice cap is gone, you will now draw another alert token and put it on the corresponding number. And that's how this will work. Now, if you get a number that's lower than the temperature, do not worry. The temperature will not be taken until the end of the player's next turn. So you'll still have at least one turn to play out before another ice cap will melt. And that's basically how this game is going to work. Now, that is something that you'll have to watch for sure. And I think that's everything. I think I've explained pretty much everything. There are cards that let you do a certain amount of abilities, of course. You'll need to get more data tokens as well. And there's 10 altogether of possible cards that will give you abilities, but there's only 5 of these special tiles out. So you're only going to get 5 of the 10 special abilities at most anyways, which is why I say you might get a card that lets you put out more helicopter tokens. You might. It's possible. But it's also possible that it might not happen either. Either way, you look at it, this is going to be a very hard game, for sure. And I hope you guys will watch me in the corresponding video of how I play this game and see if I can actually save all of these polar bears. So, we'll see you guys in the gameplay video after this. Thank you guys for watching.